The DCEU gets more hate than a 30-second unskippable YouTube ad for Nickelback, and it's mostly undeserved. They put out some really good films like SHAZAM and Wonder Woman, but even an active fan of the franchise can see that they've made a few blunders along the way. In an effort to mix things up, Warner Bros. Has changed course with their DC movie operation in recent years, putting us at the start of a new beginning for the franchise as it moves away from interconnected storytelling and focuses more on standalone adventures. But that won't stop us pouring through the burning remains of the old model like the first responders to a nuclear explosion to highlight the most obvious missteps along the way. I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 10 things the DCEU wishes it could have done differently. Number 10. Change Wonder Woman's third act. Even though Wonder Woman is the most critically acclaimed movie in the DCEU so far, a lot of fans agreed that its final act left a lot to be desired. A loud, explosive fight sequence between Diana Prince and Ares filled with some cheesy boss battle dialogue, the film's closing third really didn't gel with the rest of the film, which was otherwise a much smarter and more thoughtful superhero tale. Ares' emergence is easily the weakest part of the film, and it sours the overall experience of the viewer. It also dumbed down the movie's thematic weight. Throughout the film, Diana believes that Ares is the big puppet master behind the entirety of World War I, and that by killing him, the war will end. But for a brief moment, this belief is shown to be false when Diana kills who she thinks is Ares, and the soldiers below her still carry on with their war-related business. Wonder Woman is about Diana coming to discover and understand the horrors of the real world, so this was a fitting lesson for the somewhat naive and inexperienced heroine to learn, and a refreshing twist for audiences accustomed to the same old CGI battles closing out their comic book movies. Well, scratch that, Ares was behind the whole thing after all, and we got a much shallower ending to a Hollywood film. Number 9. Released SHAZAM at Christmas. Just below Wonder Woman, SHAZAM is the second highest rated movie in the DCEU on Rotten Tomatoes, but financially, Billy Batson and his electric alter ego didn't come close to replicating Diana Prince's huge success. Worldwide, SHAZAM made just $364 million by the end of its run. That number wasn't disastrous by any means, but currently, the movie stands as the lowest grossing DCEU outing by around $300 million. However, it might have performed a lot better financially if Warner Bros. Had held it back for a Christmas release. For starters, the movie itself is set at Christmas time, and is heavy on Christmas imagery as well as Christmassy related themes. It's all about families, even unorthodox ones, sticking together. A perfectly warm, fuzzy message that winter moviegoers would have devoured. Plus, DC literally just released a movie at Christmas that proved to be a smash hit. Aquaman. With $1 billion in the bank, it's the DCEU's best financial performer, and benefited from a slow January period that allowed it to rack up repeat viewings. True, SHAZAM would have faced even greater competition this December in the form of Star Wars, Jumanji and Frozen, but even if a December 2019 launch for SHAZAM caused it to make half of what Aquaman did, it would still be a bigger financial success than the April 2019 SHAZAM we did get, and the film's built-in Christmas connections would have only helped. Number 8. Had more Batman v Superman in Batman v Superman. In the run-up to release, we all had our own lists of things we most wanted to see in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and everyone was expecting some Justice League setup, but the one thing every single person on the planet really wanted to see was Supes and Bats beating the hell out of each other. We wanted Batman v Superman. Sadly, one of the most frustrating things about the film was the fact that we only got one short fight scene between the two heroes before they teamed up to fight a cave troll. The movie sold itself on its title fight, basically every poster had the characters squaring off against one another, but it didn't deliver enough of that action. In all likelihood, more fight scenes between Batman and Superman would have improved the film's reception. Number 7. Made Joker the villain in Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad was hyped up as the DCEU's version of Guardians of the Galaxy, but the final product was a bit of a mess. Its editing and pacing were all over the place, its story was unsatisfying, and certain characters were grossly underused. The film had a lot of problems, but arguably its biggest was the primary villain, Enchantress. Not only did it make zero sense to put a team consisting of mostly normal humans against a deadly sorceress, but the actual execution of the magical villain sucked. How different things could have been if Jared Leto's Joker had been the main antagonist instead. This would have pitted the squad against a villain who actually matched their abilities, given Leto a more interesting role to work with, kept the film feeling more street level, and given the Joker a story more closely related to the main plot, instead of the random sideshow he was lumped with in the current version. Even the film's director thinks Joker should have been the villain, which tells you all you need to know. Number 6. Not filmed Justice League immediately after Batman v Superman's release. The problem with assuming that your movie will be successful is that it might not be successful, something that Warner Bros. Discovered in 2016. When the studio set Justice League to go before cameras literally 2 weeks after Batman v Superman's release, they were assuming that the latter film would land with a positive splash, both financially and critically, but it didn't. That might have been fine if they had plenty of time afterwards to assess the situation and understand what went wrong, but with Justice League about to start shooting in literally a fortnight's time, the whole thing turned into a mad scramble to save it from the same fate BVS just suffered, by altering it while the wheels were already turning. And in the patchwork finished product, you can almost see this mad scramble popping through onto the screen. The movie had clearly been significantly reshot and came through as a tonal mess. 5. Not announced all those movies so early. Because it's apparently cool to announce a boatload of franchise films years in advance, even when said franchise is not yet an established success, Warner Bros. Decided to announce an extensive comic book movie slate of its own in late 2014, featuring 2 Justice League movies along with standalone Flash, Cyborg and Green Lantern flicks, on top of the likes of BVS and Suicide Squad. The list spanned from 2016 to 2020, a clear sign that the studio was going all in with its own cinematic universe plans. Or at least, that was the idea. Instead, thanks to a variety of factors, the underwhelming response to Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, the inability to lock down filmmakers, 4 of the 10 projects they announced disappeared into the void, and have yet to materialize to this day. As a result, Warner Bros. Ended up with egg on its face, a ton of internet bashing, and an army of confused and disappointed fans who weren't, and still aren't, quite sure which movies are happening. Number 4. Sorted out Henry Cavill's moustache. Henry Cavill's moustache became an internet legend throughout the latter half of 2017, but for all the wrong reasons. With Cavill prohibited from shaving it off and Justice League's visual effects team pressed for time, the filmmakers had to hastily cover up every single hair present on his face in order to blend the film's reshoots with the previously shot footage, in which Superman was clean shaven. You've all seen pictures of it by now, along with the social media reactions, the reaction videos, and the memes, but this wasn't a case where the internet turned a non-issue into an issue. All this commotion really was warranted because for a $300 million blockbuster, the CGI here looked bad. Justice League already had a lot of bad press in the run-up to its release, and the mustache gates only caused it to become the butt of even more jokes. The visual effects artists weren't really at fault here, since they simply weren't given enough time to pull off such a complex job. Number 3. Not tried to replicate the Marvel formula. When the Avengers shocked the world by becoming the 3rd highest grossing film of all time during the summer of 2012, it was inevitable that Hollywood would stop, notice, and attempt to replicate that astounding success. Cinematic universes were the new hot thing, and in that, Warner Bros. Saw an opportunity. The following year, they released Man of Steel, which was littered with references to a wider, interconnected DC universe. It was clear that the groundwork for a shared universe was being laid, and sure enough, BVS was officially unveiled at 2013's San Diego Comic-Con. But the decision to launch headfirst into a cinematic universe of their own didn't exactly work out the way Warner Bros. Intended. Batman vs Superman was bogged down by heaps and heaps of heavy-handed universe building, and this was one of the reasons why the film felt bloated and poorly paced. The cinematic universe took precedence over a good story. Number 2. Injected more levity into those early films. Partly thanks to the success of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, DC is now viewed as the dark and gritty to Marvel's light-hearted fun. Annoyingly, this perception even seems to exist when the characters themselves might not fit with that tone. We've got 2 films featuring Superman that had the character just moping around for the majority of the runtime, and even Batman had been made darker than he normally was, with Batfleck murdering practically anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in his path. There's absolutely nothing wrong with grounded and gritty storytelling in superhero movies, but the DCEU's mistake was injecting this tone into the very characters themselves and not providing enough levity to balance things out. Cavill's Superman in particular has been heavily criticized for his general pessimism and sadness, which Warner Bros. Responded to by rebooting him into a much more colourful figure in Justice League's 3rd act, garnering a more positive response in the process. They've also rebooted the tone of their entire operation, with SHAZAM bordering on a full-on comedy, and Aquaman one of the lighter, brighter superhero movies in recent years, and overall, this reboot has been a huge success. Number 1 found their own version of the MCU's Kevin Feige. The overseer of the MCU and a god to superhero film lovers the world over, Kevin Feige has been a producer on everything from Iron Man to Avengers Endgame, and is the guy who makes all the big decisions over at Marvel Studios. One of the most impressive things about that empire he's built is the fact that we never hear about any behind-the-scenes troubles on any MCU films, a feat that the MCU can almost take ownership of within the franchise space. Basically, he's a competent leader with an exciting vision. Compare this to the DCEU, which, for the majority of its life cycle, has been a hotbed of bad press, failed projects, and odd creative decisions. Directors come and go, random movies like Deathstroke and Deadshot are outed and then never heard from again, nobody knew if Ben Affleck was Batman for a good year and a half, and we still don't know if Henry Cavill is still Superman. The DCEU needs a Kevin Feige, and it's needed one for quite some time. Fortunately, positive steps were made in this direction when Walter Hamada was appointed as DC Films' president in January 2018, and things have definitely been looking up ever since. But the damage the brand suffered as a result of Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad and Justice League, and all of the off-screen issues surrounding them, will be tough to wipe out, and a lot of that damage could have been avoided if the early DCEU had someone who could confidently steer the ship in the right direction. So there it is, 10 things the DCEU wishes it could have done differently. Hindsight is 2020, so looking into the future, hopefully they'll keep the recent trend going and pull out some more great stuff. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.